Good morning. Thank you, Grant. That's just about it for the day. Please stand as you are able and join me in the call to worship. We are not alone. We live in God's world.
Who has created and is creating us.
We are not alone. God's creation surrounds us.
God who calls us to love and serve all.
We are not alone in joy and despair.
In well-being and adversity, God is with us. And we are
Not alone. Please remain standing as we sing our opening hymn. Welcome, whether you're in the sanctuary, online, in a boat, on an airplane, wherever you are welcome here. A couple of announcements. After the service, please join us downstairs in the fellowship hall for an art talk by Phyllis Yes, in conjunction with her exhibit, Dusty at Home, which opens in the chapel gallery after her talk. The fellowship hall is set up a little differently this morning. There will be several rows of chairs at the north end with a view of the screen, several round tables in back of them, and beverages and fellowship hour goodies behind them at the south end. There may be guests joining us, and we would like to start promptly. So please get your drinks and snacks and be seated. I also want to make two relatively brief announcements related to our status as an immigrant welcoming congregation. 5 years ago, we adopted our declaration unanimously. Since then, we've been an active participant in monthly meetings of about a dozen UCC churches in the Central Pacific Conference who have declared themselves a sanctuary or immigrant welcoming church. This work has become even more important in the last month. In mid-January, 6 of us from Central Pacific Conference churches attended Common Ground on the Border, an annual immigration justice conference in Sahuarita, Arizona. We had an enjoyable, informative, and exhaustingly long weekend. For example, Judy delivered Bienvenido's quilts to a family shelter in Nogales, Sonora. 4 days later, when people at the shelter were confirming their asylum credible fear interviews, many already having lived at the shelter for over a year, learned that their appointments had been canceled. The door to entering the U.S. the right way had just been slammed in their faces. I joined Alvaro Enciso. Alvaro is an 80-year-old Tucson-based artist, and we installed 2 wooden crosses he had made as memorials for migrants who had died in the desert. Over the last dozen years, Alvaro has installed over 1,700 memorials in urban and remote settings in the desert. No 2 crosses are the same. Next Tuesday, Alvaro is leading a group to the end of the wall west of Nogales to place a cross where last month a woman's body was carried across the border and left on the U.S. side. As this map depicts, Alvaro's crosses mark less than a third of the known deaths that have occurred in the Arizona desert since 2000. The red dots on the map mark where 1 or more deaths has occurred. Over 4,400 deaths, crosses mark 1,700 of them. But immigration and border issues aren't occurring only far away, Arizona or Texas or something. They're happening outside our doors and across Oregon and affecting tens of thousands of our neighbors and their families. On Saturday, February 22nd, several of us who attended the Common Ground at the Border conference will be presenting our experiences during the regular meeting of Eve's Circle. Please join us at 10 a.m. to learn what we did and to discuss what we can do as a church community. We'll be inviting other UCC churches to join us too. Finally, over the last 5 years, several of us have volunteered with the Immigrant Mutual Aid Coalition, IMAC. It's an all-volunteer food pantry that on a bi-monthly basis distributes food and supplies to over 300 mostly Hispanic families in Clackamas County and surrounding communities. I did this yesterday, for about 5 hours. Ask me if you'd like to learn more about what this opportunity is and one way in which we can express our being an immigrant welcoming congregation. This ends our announcements this morning. There's a lot going on at Portland First.
Bruce, are men invited to that Eve's Circle, please?
We are a welcoming congregation, and men are invited to that Eve's Circle meeting. That's kind of breakthrough. We've never been welcome before. Are we singing now? Okay. Let me look at my program. Thank you. I'm done.
turn. I'm Susan Adcock, one of the members of Bienvenidos Quilts. Bienvenidos Quilts began in March of 2021. Rachel Stevens got a group of us together after seeing photos of children wrapped in aluminum blankets at the southern border. She dreamed of giving beautiful quilts to those children. Because of that dream, a small group of us have been quilting every Monday here at the church for almost 4 years. Our purpose is to make and send comforting quilts to children and families who come to the border hoping to make the United States their home. We have a website, and people from around the country, from several states, who believe in our mission have sent us quilts or quilt tops. To date, we have logged in 1,033 quilt tops and have sent over 900 completed quilts to the border. We have been sending quilts to shelters near the border in Arizona about 3 or 4 times a year. Last December, we sent, for the first time, about 60 quilts to a UCC church that works with migrants near Brownsville, Texas. In January, when the border closed to immigrants, we began to worry, mostly about the people and their welfare, but also about whether we could still get quilts to immigrants. People who had been staying in missions and shelters, waiting for paperwork to be processed, left those places and became inaccessible to us. Last week, our local Bienvenidos crew met and discussed options. We decided to call various faith groups to see whether any of them needed quilts for local immigrants. When we called Catholic Charities and spoke to Morgan Anderson from their immigration office, she told us that Catholic Charities cares for immigrants who come to Portland to live and work, and that they would be happy to distribute quilts. Today we have 45 quilts displayed in the pews, or on the pews, and these will be taken to Catholic Charities next week. These particular quilts were made by people sewing in Washington State, California, and Oregon. Now I am pleased to introduce Ed Langlois from Catholic Charities, who is here to tell us a bit about what their group does for immigrants in our area. After he speaks, Pastor Derek will bless the quilts. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, everyone. What a joy to look out and see those beautiful quilts, but then see the beautiful people sitting among them. I want to start today with the story of Lucy, who's now 23 years old. Lucy grew up in Burma at the hands of a murderous regime. Her father was pressed into helping the military, as a slave almost, but he made a daring escape. He jumped off a cliff and trekked through the jungle to Thailand. He then sent for the rest of the family, 6 siblings, including Lucy and her grandmother, and that little group made their own dangerous journey to safety. Eventually, this family was sent to Portland by U.S. immigration officials. This was around Christmas a decade ago. Catholic Charities was handling the resettlement and bought Lucy a warm wool coat and had black and gray plaid on it. Since she wasn't accustomed to Portland's damp chill, the coat really came in handy. But for her, it was more than a coat. She recalls it now as an embrace of love and caring and belonging. I have no doubt that your spectacular and lovingly made quilts are going to create a similar feeling for many people in our care. These quilts are going to become treasured belongings of families that will be passed on through generations. And they'll remember that someone cared enough about them when they were new in the United States. As for all refugees and immigrants we serve at Catholic Charities, our caseworkers help Lucy's family get settled in school and jobs and offered food, cultural education, and language skills. The family at first squeezed into an apartment, the only one we could find for them at the time. There was one bathroom for 8 people. But Catholic Charities matched the savings that the family made to get a down payment together for a house. And then Lucy's family purchased a 5-bedroom place and lived in it and live in it to this day. Lucy went to high school, graduated, and then went to the University of Portland. Remembering the Catholic Charities staff who were so important to her as a child, she opted to major in social work. She graduates this spring. After a series of conversations I had with Lucy, she concluded with this. She said, "Tell people that we are part of the community, contributing good stuff to the country, contributing good stuff to Oregon. We are more than just refugees." In addition to resettling more than 500 refugees each year, people of all faiths or none, Catholic Charities runs a busy Immigration Legal Services office. We handle as many as 400 cases at one time. These are people who came to the United States because it's the land of their dreams. They want to be part of it. They want to fill up its well springs of common good. Our lawyers use laws passed by Congress to help these people gain legal status. In addition, we provide food, housing, access to health care to anyone, no matter their status. We have more than 1,200 units of affordable housing around Oregon, most of it in Portland. And I think your quilts will become a centerpiece in many of those rooms. As you know already, migrants are really the sustenance that keeps our nation healthy. In addition to bringing cultural richness, they start more businesses, and they commit fewer crimes than the rest of us. That's despite the falsehoods spread in many quarters. Your quilts and your advocacy form a bridge of truth that soars right over all that ugliness. On behalf of Lucy and migrants of all kinds, I thank you for your warmth and your care. History will smile on you, as will the living, loving God. Thank you.
We are, so having spoken with the quilters, they're actually very grateful that there's a place to gift. There is a way to give the quilts that they're making when their ability to do so at the border was closed off. I found that remarkably moving. When I was in Costa Rica, they took us to various different forests, which had a number of very ancient trees, and then what they called parasites, parasitic plants, that grew out of the trees. They were opportunistic. They were determined to live, despite the challenging acidic environment that apparently the soil would not provide. But the fact that a plant could be a parasite, I found that slightly amusing. But beyond that, if you're a botanist, please forgive me, but beyond that, what I heard in that story was that life insists on happening, and it will push its way through. And that was the picture in my head when the quilters came and said, we can't deliver these to the border right now. We have to do something else. Can we give them to Catholic Charities? And I said, well, they didn't really ask my permission, but nobody asks my permission for anything, which is fine. But I just found it remarkable that Giving insists on happening. That was the parallel in my head. And that's what we're doing. We can't bring them to the border at the moment, so we're doing something else, something remarkable. And thank you for being here and sharing. Would you stand with me, because you are sending these to a new recipient, and just extend your hands as I put mine on them. Holy God, we are thankful that we can participate in the compassion that you insist on pushing out through people like our quilters to those who need to receive it. Thank you that we can participate in the love that you have for people around the globe and for those in this city, right down the block, that need you in various different ways. And thank you for all of the love that is extended through these quilts, that was woven into their fabric. May that love, as well as the physical warmth, may that love be felt by those that wear these. Amen. And now please greet the people around you with the peace of God. And come up and say hello to Ed if you'd like. In the words and prayer of St. Augustine, "O God, your wisdom has no end. You have formed us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they find their rest in you." But how shall we find such rest, O God? Who will send you into our hearts that we may forget our woes and embrace you, you who are our only joy? Alas, speak that we may hear. Tell us of your compassion, for the ears of our hearts are open and before you. And as we hear, may we run and lay hold of you. Therefore, hide not your face from us. Holy One, we hunger for you. We hunger to know you more, to have eyes to see and ears to hear you ourselves, to know you are close, even when you feel so far away, and to be heard by you, addressing our needs and our questions with the assurance that we all always seem to lack in ourselves. God, we join the tens of millions around the globe who are even today, even now, praying for the victims of violence, of crime, of political upheaval, and of natural disaster. For those in our own country who have become targets by our new administration, and whose welcome and rights, as well as their very dignity, have been stripped from them. For all of these, a cry for compassion and a change of circumstance erupts from our hearts and from our throats. Bring them to a better place, O God. Carry them not only in your arms of safety, but in a new place of security, where they can experience the joy of living once again. And finally, for those among us in our own community who are struggling with illness, physical or mental, with distress, with various types of physical or emotional insecurity, or the stability in their home and relationships or employment. Dear God, extend your hand to lift them up and bring them either out of or through their trials. And we now lift the names of those that we carry a special burden for, that we came into those doors concerned and worried about. We lift their names to you now, silently or aloud. for Lisa Hicks having shoulder surgery on Wednesday. Holy One, all these we lift up to you. In the name of the one that we claim to follow, who also taught his disciples how to pray. Now please join me in a child's version of that prayer. Our Father in heaven, you are awesome. Show us who you are and how you want us to be. Make earth more like heaven. Please give us what we need to keep going and forgive us when we are wrong. Help us let other people off the hook. Keep us from bad stuff because you are in charge. You're strong and powerful and always there. Amen.
Our first reading this morning comes from the book of Exodus, chapter 32. When the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, the people gathered around Aaron and said to him, "Come, make gods for us who shall go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what became of him." Aaron said to them, "Take off the gold rings that are on the ears of your wives, your sons, and your daughters, and bring them to me." So all the people took off the gold rings from their ears and brought them to Aaron. He took these from them, formed them in a mold, and cast an image of a calf. And they said, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt." When Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it. And Aaron made a proclamation and said, "Tomorrow shall be a festival to the Lord." They rose early the next day and offered burnt offerings and brought sacrifices of well-being. And the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to revel. The second reading is from the prophet Micah, chapter 6. With what shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before God on high? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? The voice of the Lord cries to the city, and he shall save those who fear wickedness in the house of the wicked and the despicable false measure. Can I tolerate wicked scales and a bag of dishonest weights? Your wealthy are full of violence. Your inhabitants speak lies with tongues of deceit in their mouths. Here ends the readings for this morning.
I would invite you to join me in echoing what the choir sang a few minutes ago, saying, "May the words of my lips and the meditations of each heart be acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer." It's great to be with you this morning. I don't always get to do that. Since I have been the moderator and last year moderator-elect of the Central Pacific Conference of the, okay? They need your cues. They need my cues, yes. I thought, there we are, yes, of the Central Pacific Conference. I have been able to visit about 35 of the 41 congregations. Some of that visiting was online. Now, other congregations get this all boiled down to about 2.5 minutes, but you get the unboiled version. I'll let you figure that out. I have learned 2 lessons. The first lesson is that there are no cookie-cutter congregations in the Central Pacific Conference. Now, I went about this with blinders that I didn't know I had. Now, if you don't know what blinders are, they're what you put on the side of a horse's head, so it reduces the horse's field of vision and they only go where you want them to, and not off on the side. And I had my blinders, my narrow visions, my expectations and assumptions. First, I knew how churches kind of ought to be. My history is in big churches, long central aisles, big organs, carillons, that kind of thing. And I kind of thought that's how churches wanted to be. Spoiler alert, that's not true. But as we see, we have 41 congregations and 2 camps, and each congregation is different. Slide B. Here we go. Yes, we have 32 of the 41 are open and affirming. That includes us. 19 are just peace, and then we are one of 10 or so immigrant welcoming congregations. It's also interesting or important to note that half of the congregations are in cities of less than 50,000 people, and 10 of those in cities of less than 10,000. And when you're in a city less than 10,000, it's very different from a city like Portland. But we've all met many challenges, many different challenges over the last several years. Demographic changes, economic stressors, socio-political changes, and of course, COVID. And each congregation has met these in its own way, with its own resources and appropriate to its own setting. But taken together as a conference, and now we're at C, taken together as a conference, we have accepted the challenge of 4 mission priorities: to nurture spiritual growth, to foster stronger connections, to amplify our prophetic voice, and to become an anti-racist conference. You've probably heard some of those before. And these are priorities we continue to work on in the conference as a whole. But I've noticed a lot of differences. We have one congregation that worships without its own building. Well, we also have several congregations which share buildings with other churches or other congregations, as well as a variety of community organizations that use space. We have at least 2 congregations sharing with Jewish congregations. We have 2 others that share with Pacific Islander congregations. And our Vancouver church hosts the local MCC, or Metropolitan Community Church, which was founded and focused on the needs of the LGBTQ community. Sunday morning, interesting differences. One is the collection, if it's even taken up on a Sunday morning. Not every church does that. If it is taken up, when in the service that happens and how. Some are very nice, organized ushers who come down with the plates, and I saw one where they just asked a couple of kids to grab a basket and run around and collect. It was a lot of fun. We, at First, have a history and a desire for professional, ordained, full-time pastoral leadership. But some of our congregations use lay leadership or pulpit supply, such as Frog Pond, which invites our own Frank Baldwin down once a month to lead worship there. And quite a number of churches have part-time pastors. Now, I've been impressed by a few things. One is the quality of musicians. I'm happy to say that Grant is not the only qualified, productive musician in the CPC. There are actually quite a few. And we have many strong preachers, worship leaders, and many of them were not UCC raised. And this means that they bring a different sense to the worship on Sunday morning, maybe a different flow, maybe different hymns, all of this adding breadth and depth to our worship times. Importantly, for me at least, I've noticed that I can understand some congregations just by walking in the door. I might see a bulletin board or a kiosk with information about the church, information about things that are important and relevant to the people in the church and people who use the church. Flyers of activities for the church, the conference, thank you notes from other organizations, or general information people might need. Things like community food programs, health or safety programs, even alerts about scams that may be targeting the church members or other people in the building. Now, all of that is not marketing or advertising. It is just letting people know who come to the building, letting them know what is important to that congregation, and meeting the needs of the folk who use the building. If I've heard one concern from pastors, it's that of sometimes feeling siloed, alone in their work. That's not universal, but it's one of those things that happens. A lack of connection with other congregations or clergy, especially those engaged in justice work. It can be lonely, despite their best efforts to focus together, and that's understandable given some of the distance and the busy schedules of solo pastors. Now that brings me to lesson number 2. Churches, at least the general folk, usually think they're doing things well. Except maybe budget and attendance, there's always that question. But they generally think they have good, if not exemplary preaching, good, if not exemplary music, and active social justice and outreach, and wonderful feelings of community and welcome, even down to the coffee hour goodies. But, it's hard to know how you're doing if you can only see what you've done. Now, it's not up to me to correct them or critique them or anything like that. It's not my job. But I do sometimes go away thinking, I'm glad we don't do that at first. Or, more likely, I kind of wish we did do that at church at first. So, Exodus. There's a lot to unpack here, but I'm going to leave that to somebody else to explain. I'm just going to say that, in my experience, if we ever hear about the golden calf, it is often to judge the folks at the foot of the mountain. A finger-wagging insistence on the first commandment, or Moses' reaction, or God's wrath. But we didn't get that far in the story today. We just got to the feasting and the dancing. And we should remember, the people had been through trauma after trauma. It had been a long journey, a lot of problems. They had been left at the foot of the mountain. Moses had been gone for a while. Nobody knew where he was. Mountains are dangerous places. So what did the people do? They returned to what they knew, what they could see from their history, their experience, their blinders. Coming out of Egypt, idol worship was a known commodity. It's understandable. It worked before, it'll work again. It was good enough for Grandpa. But this golden calf was pulling them backwards and not forwards to where their future. But now let's talk about something else, and now there we are. Okay. Maybe some of you can relate to this. It's something closer than golden calves. This is a spoon. It's a nice spoon. It's a big serving spoon. It's a silver spoon. It's been in my family for generations. At least my great-grandmother served countless Christmas dinners and Thanksgiving dinners and on and on and on. Now, my problem is I have it, I keep it, I kind of like it, but I have nowhere to use it and no one to give it to. Yes, there are very extended family, but no one wants it. Its time has come, peaked, and gone, and I hear your chuckles. And many of you, because I know many of you are facing the same situation with a set of china, an old overstuffed armchair you don't want to get rid of, or maybe a record collection, or lots of other things, you name it. All stuff that means something to you, as this means something to me, or something that may mean something to us, but is of no interest to others, especially younger generations. It's just not how folk live today. It's not fit for today's lifestyle. Now, part of me knows that I need to let this go. But I really want someone to want it. And I don't think that's going to happen. So my question becomes, when does this silver spoon become a golden calf? I guess when it costs me more to keep it or house it or keep it polished than the pleasure it gives me. Or perhaps when it becomes a burden to the folks who have to go through my estate someday. Now, this church also has a stash of silver. It's a tea, coffee service, and maybe more. And some of you may have used some of it in the past. But it's no longer of use. It is all packed away, locked in a closet, and mostly forgotten about, the accoutrements of times past. Now, why do we as a church still have it? Because it's hard to let go of. It has history and it has memories. Even if we no longer use it, it can keep our eyes on the past, thinking of times past when we did use it, and hoping for times in the future when we might use it. It's kind of like a collective golden calf. Now, Pastor Derek has led us, or actually is leading us, through a visioning process. And I was struck by two words that he used in his sermon on the 29th and in his written report, and that is dare and risk. He's challenged us to be daring in worship, but I think we can expand that to other realms. But to be daring is to risk safety, to risk familiarity, to risk resources, to risk money, to risk change, to risk failure. We need to understand that what we know, what we are familiar with, may or may not be working well anymore. It may or may not resonate with the folks with whom we need to join to do God's work in Portland. Whether that means joining us here on a Sunday morning, or whether that means uniting with us in other times and places. If we want to discern the essence of a faith and a tradition we want to share and pass on, we need to be willing to identify and jettison our golden calves. Returning to lesson 2 from my visits, churches which think they know what they're doing, who think they are doing it right, even to the coffee hour treats, may feel they have a lock on doing things right. They may. I don't know. But locks are rigid, and life demands flexibility. I look forward to the next 6 months or the next year because I feel we are on a new journey. One where we can throw off the limiting blinders and drop at least some, of the burdensome golden calves. Amen.
As Phil Owen just told us, giving is the highlight of our church. This is the time that we offer our gifts. The ushers will collect the offerings. Our dedication prayer. O God, giver of life and sustenance, we offer up ourselves to you in this moment, and from what is ours we offer up to you. Cause it to increase to the needs it is meant to meet, and rest your blessing on it. Amen. Please stand as you're able and join in singing our closing hymn, and afterwards come downstairs for fellowship and for the lecture.
And for thy gospel
you are planning on attending Phyllis Yes's presentation, please go immediately down there instead of hanging out to listen to Grant's wonderful postlude, because we will be starting promptly at 11:45, and we will have guests downstairs from outside waiting to do that. Okay? Thank you. Author and sociologist Martha Beck reminded her readers that every day brings new choices. So continuing that thought, every new choice brings with it the opportunity to engage change in either a transformative way or one that causes us to shrink back in fear. My invitation to you, in concert with Phil's message, is may we choose transformation. Go in peace.